Until now, we talked a little bit about the role of religion from a fitra point of view. The second question was the role of reason to faith. So now let's go back to faith. We have to start comparing them. Are they supposed to be playing the same role, or are they supposed to be playing different roles? Reason and faith or religion. In other words, for someone to say they're not compatible, it basically means that they're competing for the same thing. They're both trying to do the same thing, but one of them is better than the other. So is that what faith and reason are trying to do? Are they competing for the same thing, or are they trying to do different things? Is the question clear? Does anyone have an answer? Yeah?
I think that like my reasoning, the way that the right reasoning is hard to do because we're in this world of temptation. But the faith gives a meaning to my reasoning. I like to what I do. So like basically, like say I pray 5 times a day, and then one of the prayers I go like, oh, like maybe if prayer is a bad idea, maybe like I think it's a good idea to go and fight someone. But then a part of my reasoning goes like, there's 2 parts of it. There's a part of it where it goes like, oh, he did this to me, I should go beat him up. Or the other reasoning is like, I shouldn't just make it a bigger problem. I should try to talk it out with words. Like it does sound that if I do talk it out with words, then I'm like a lesser of a person. I'm lesser of a man in the eyes of the society, you know, in the eyes of the kids in my school maybe. But because of faith, it gives me a reason to do the right thing, which is go and talk to him. So that's what I think is how they like are compatible between each other.
Okay. Your example made me now think that I had to spend more time explaining what I mean by the words. But that's good, because you basically are using them in a very practical way. I'm using them in a way that means we're talking about the source of knowledge. Where does your knowledge come from? When you know something, where is that knowledge coming from? Is it coming from your mind? Is it coming from your human ability to discover the truth on your own? That's what we call reasoning, rationality, logic. Or is it coming from a religious type of knowledge, which is your faith, which is completely different? You're not going to be using your own human ability to reach that one. That one you may be following blindly. Because you say, this is what the scripture says, I believe in it. So the question is, the big problem we have is that there are people who say those two are not compatible. You have your blind faith because you believe in the scripture, and so you will do what that scripture says, or you will believe in what that scripture says to believe in, on one side. And you also have your reason, your own human knowledge, what you can maybe test in a laboratory, that may or may not correspond to that. So the question is, are these two competing? When we say that, what we've been trying to say, we say the claim of Islam until now, the verses of the Quran that we read, that's what we're trying to talk about. The Quran say use your mind, just like you would use it in science, in the same exact manner. So now we're asking, are they actually compatible or not? So let's start from the most fundamental question and say, are they competing for the same thing on the same territory? Are they trying to do the same thing or not?
Yes.
Yes? What are they trying to do?
The reason, okay, they kind of like they're similar to each other. Your faith is what you have faith in no matter what happens, okay? To only reach that, okay, the reason, it's a backup, it's like a backup to faith. Reason backs up faith in a way, okay? Uh, they have something in common. They're both trying to do the same thing.
Which is what?
To reach the right
Truth.
truth.
Okay. That's one answer. We'll see. Are there others? Do we agree with that? Or do we disagree with that? Or we don't have an answer. We don't know. Yes.
I feel like if you only used your reasoning, like how can you tell that that's right? Like if it's your own reasoning, right? There's no way for you, like if your reasoning is telling you to do something, right? That thing might not be right.
Okay, so I have two questions for you. Give me an example when you said your reasoning is telling you to do something. Give me an example of the something just so that I know what you're thinking. And the second thing is, what do you mean by right? Do you mean that it matches the truth, or do you mean that right versus wrong, it's a wrong thing to do?
Like, by like, it's a wrong thing to do.
Okay, so you're talking about morals. Morally wrong, morally right. Good. Okay, so like what?
I wasn't thinking of anything
Okay,
specific.
okay.
But like, if, like that's what, like there wouldn't be anything that would go against it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there like you would have no way of not like of knowing that it's wrong basically. Even if what you think it's right, like you think that it's right to do.
Yeah.
But if you didn't believe it in anything, right? That wouldn't, like basically what I'm saying is that they have to work together.
I have.
Like they can't. Like they're not fighting for the same thing.
They're not fighting against each other.
So they're like compatible.
That's why they're compatible, because
Yeah.
they are each trying to do something different, and
Yeah.
you need both.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have an example for his
Yeah.
situation. Okay, punishment for somebody stealing.
Yeah.
In faith, what do you believe in? Based on your faith, okay, is he should be punished. Reasoning is, let's go ask him why did he intend to steal? Maybe there's something behind it.
Maybe he's
Just
hungry.
huh?
Maybe he's hungry.
That's something to back up his. I don't know.
I think you have to go when faith only comes with going deep into your reasoning and actually believing into your reasoning, like finding the final, getting to the last level. Then you make it your faith. You can't get to faith without reasoning, and it's not true faith. Like it will change.
Okay.
Based on what the brother said, I had a question that came up. Does faith influence your reasoning or your logic? Because it seems like different people have different logics or ways of rationalizing things, and based on their perception of life and their stage of life and your stage of your age and so on, there's different stages of logic or different ways people rationalize and think of things logically than other people. So I was thinking, does faith have something to influence with rationalization, or is that just people are just not using their rationalization the right way, or I don't know if I did.
Okay. It's a good question. I'm not going to answer it right away. I'm going to wait a little bit more, and I'm going to come back to it. Okay. So, yeah.
So what do you mean exactly by faith and reasoning? Like what do you mean by faith? Like as in religion and like religious beliefs, as in like what's backed up by your own religion. So
Or?
like morally too, or is that kind of faith, or is that reasoning?
It depends. It depends where your morals come from. These are different levels of morality. So some people, their morals come from a rational belief or a rational system. They do it because, as Kant would say, it's a right thing to do, philosophically. And there are other people who do it because their religion says to do it. And even within religion, we have the three big layers, right? Which there are people who worship God. Why? Because they're afraid of hell. And those who worship God because they want heaven. And those who worship God because they think He is worthy of worship. These are very different kinds of worship. Very different levels of faith and very different understandings of why you do something. Your motivation is different. So while we agree that it may be rational, even within faith there are different ways of looking at it. So when you say, for instance, you do something, it depends. Are you taking it from a... Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. It depends where you're getting it from. So I may be a believer, but my morality is more rational, or my morality is coming directly from a scripture. Okay, so that part depends. That's the faith part. So now what I'm saying, faith is something that comes to you from a scripture. It's almost like a blind following of something. But is it a blind following? That's what we're going to get to a little bit later. And the part that is rationality, this is the exact question I wanted people to ask. Which is, what do we mean by it? Because it can mean different things. In a lot of cases, what we're talking about when you hear that there's an incompatibility between reason and religion, or between faith and reason, what they're really talking about is not reason. They're talking about natural science. So we have to look at natural science specifically as a field. That's one. So what is natural science meant to do? It's meant to study nature. Everything that falls under nature. With the tools we have to study nature, which are the five senses. Anything that we cannot see or hear or touch or feel with our five senses, that we cannot put in a lab and do experiments on, falls outside of what science is able to work with. It's outside of natural science. So natural science is not allowed to talk about it. So that's the first one. What does it lead to? Well, of course, it leads to huge progress in society. Natural science is meant to do that. The more you explore nature, the more you can manipulate it. The more you can do things with it. Right? And with time, your society progresses. And that's why you have societies that move from a very primitive state to being an industrial society. Or to move into a digital society or a knowledge society. Okay, that's all based on what? On progress in natural science. Now the big question is, if I progress in natural science, if I can manipulate nature a lot more than someone else, does that make me more human than them? Does that mean that I am doing, your question, am I manipulating nature in the right way? Is that the right thing to do? Or do I need to think about something else? Today in the world, they've reached a point where even those who don't believe in religion and who are atheists believe in a field, for instance, they study from a moral perspective, what does it mean to manipulate genes? So all the scientists who work on gene manipulation, because they're working on whether they should clone human beings or not, for instance, they say before we do it, we need to have a moral debate in society first, because we have to think this through. Once we do it, what is it going to mean for society? It means everything changes. We need to sit and think about this first. Okay, but this is a natural science. A natural science saying, all I can help you with is what you want to do in the lab. I'll show you what to do in the lab. But whether it's the right thing to do, whether it's the right thing, you can experiment on atoms all you want, but is it the right thing to do to build a bomb and go bomb another country like they did with the nuclear bomb? Who decides if this is the right manipulation of nature or not? Who decides whether this is going to be the human thing to do? Does it give you more humanity to do this manipulation or that manipulation of nature? The role of this natural science is going to make societies progress, and you can live a much more comfortable life, and it can give you access to things in a cheaper way, in a faster way, in a more luxurious, comfortable way. No problem about that. But it comes back to your question. Where do we get is it the right thing to do? Or how should it be done so that it is right? That's the part that the natural science has no answer to. Okay, so when we mean what we say when we say we're going to be working with natural science, or we say reason when reason means natural science, these are the pros, is that you're actually going to be able to understand nature and manipulate it. You study it, the more you study it, the more you can do things with it. You can predict it and you can manipulate it. You know exactly when an asteroid is going to hit in 50 years somewhere on Earth. And you can prepare yourself in advance. Or when an earthquake is going to happen, years before it happens, or months, or weeks, or even hours, and you have enough time to tell people to evacuate so that they don't all die. That's all natural science. But someone can also use that for something completely different. Who says what's the right manipulation, and what are you supposed to do with that knowledge? This is where the natural science has nothing more to say. You have to go into another field that gives you the tools to answer these questions. Okay. So obviously, we've already started saying something more here. We've started to see where the limits of natural science are. And we've also said something a few times now, which is, what makes you more human? So this becomes a fundamental question. What's the point of your existence? Is the point of your existence to manipulate nature? So that gives you more perfection, the ability to manipulate nature more? To do more progress? Is that the point of your existence? And this goes to your question. This falls under a bigger question, which is usually called your worldview. Or, to use terms that we've used already, your belief system. If in my belief system, the perfection of a human being is to what extent they can manipulate nature, and there are people who believe that, because they say there is nothing beyond nature. Right? If all there is nature, and nothing more, then of course whoever masters nature more, dominates nature more, uses nature more than anyone else, they have reached a higher level of perfection. And someone who says, no, there is so much more than the nature that we see. And in practical terms, the point of our existence is not nature. We're supposed to use nature for something bigger, which is our perfection. Nature is one more thing that we're supposed to do, to use, to become better people. Someone who thinks that way is not going to be using nature the same way. So to answer your question, does reason change? Well, it depends. If your reason is, let's say, the manipulation of natural science, your ability to dominate nature, if that's what we mean by reasoning, then of course it's going to change. Everything in our lives changes based on our belief system. Everything. And that's what we've been saying from the beginning. Your ability to cope with difficulties in life, your ability to interpret everything that is happening around you changes completely depending on your belief system. The way you look at a bee is going to be different if you believe in God and if you don't believe in God. That was the point of those verses. If someone wants to look at the bee only as a natural thing, then you look at the bee and you stop at the bee and you say, wow, what a wonderful creature, and it stops there. And there's a person who's going to do the same study of the bee as you did, but they're going to go a step beyond and say, and this is pointing to something else. and that becomes a door that opens to a whole other world. What is that something else? What does that God have to be like? What attributes does he have to create this bee? With this flower, in this forest, on this earth, on this galaxy, and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about that when we come to the proofs for the existence of God. Okay. Yes.
I slightly disagree with like the way you said that it lives in nature. Like they stop the door. Oh, what a wonderful creature. Because I don't think you have to believe in like a god or a deity, just so that you can open those doors and say, oh, what a wonderful creature on like in a rainforest wherever they live, just to like admire them, or not just that, but go back a few steps, like you said, and think what happened before. Like some people can go towards God, and some people can go towards the other side, which is like go all the way back to the Big Bang Theory if you want to start it that way. So closing the doors off, like saying that like naturism, I don't know, people that close the doors after that, I don't think that's accurate, because there are some people who actually go back and they do believe in the Big Bang Theory, and they actually defend it, and yeah, so that, I think you're saying that like the people believe in nature, just like that's it, and they don't think further than that. That's inaccurate.
So the person who says, I go back to the Big Bang Theory, are they going outside of nature?
No.
So, yeah, I mean, I simplified it a lot by saying they're stopping at the bee.
Yeah.
They're stopping at nature. There is no reason beyond nature for anything in nature. So someone who wants to limit themselves to natural science is going to stop at nature. Nature explains itself, and that's it. Don't ask more. The reason why it is just it is. Let's say everything is contained in the Big Bang Theory, and the Big Bang Theory is true, which is, by the way, it could be compatible with religion. No issue with that. It's still only stopping at nature.
Okay, so can I ask why ask more? So if nature explains itself, and the conclusions have been drawn, why ask more? If you know a theory to the answer, it's not 100% full answer, but nor either I would say that religion is 100% answer, because there's still stuff that are being discovered like science is. So I would say why ask more if you already have like a foundation.
That's why we're saying, what's the role of this questioning? So if we're questioning it from a natural science perspective, we're questioning to understand how it works, not why. We will never know the why, and then we go to, and how am I supposed to live? What does this mean for me as a human being who is capable of a higher level of thinking? And this brings us back to other questions that we've asked before, which is, are we just supposed to live like animals or not? If we are, then no issue. There is no need to question more. The issue is those people who believe in the Big Bang and they make philosophical or really religious, they're called metaphysical statements. Because there's a Big Bang, I live this way. No, natural science cannot tell you. It can maybe go all the way back to a Big Bang. The Big Bang cannot tell you, therefore, how you live. Unless you're telling me there is nothing beyond the Big Bang, which you can't say based on nature. Nature is only able to see, it's like you take you take glasses that can only see UV rays, okay, or infrared rays, and you wear them, and you see things that are in infrared, or you see things that are in ultraviolet light. Do you see everything else? No, it's invisible to those glasses. It's there, right in front of you, and you don't see it. Because that tool that you're using is only meant to be seeing that type of object. You are not allowed to wear those glasses and say, therefore, nothing else exists. No, it's not nothing else exists. With that tool, you cannot see anything else. With that tool, you can only see UV rays or infrared rays. You cannot see anything else. Remove them, and you might see a whole world. The person who says, and there is only natural science, yeah, natural science explains one system. Natural science cannot be the system or the tool that tells me and there is nothing beyond it. That's one. And within that same system, which is the natural science system, it cannot claim to tell me how to live in that system. All it can do is to explain to me how it's functioning. How does my eye see the light? It will explain to me how it sees it. How do I split the atom? I can get an answer from that. But can it tell me that splitting the atom is going to cause something down the road? Or it may be used in a certain way and not in a certain way? That's not natural science. So now you're going into other fields, such as morality, or moral philosophy, or ethics, or whatever you want to call it. This is where you see the limitations of natural science. But today, because natural science, in the old world they used to call it philosophy. At some point, philosophy was everything. The study of everything was philosophy. So a philosopher is a person who has studied everything. Today it's impossible to study everything. You can take a field like psychology and there's like 37 different subfields in it. In one field, which is psychology. And you multiply that by hundreds of other fields and you start seeing why today it's impossible to study everything. But what natural science is starting to do now, especially the very activist natural scientists who have stepped outside those bounds of natural science, they're trying to make natural science replace everything else. Whereas before there were other systems trying to talk about the big picture, and they shouldn't have, because that was a mistake too. Today, natural science is stepping outside of its field and claiming that it can say how people are supposed to live. I study biology, therefore I can tell you what humanity should look like. I study biology and I will tell you what your economic system should be. I study biology and tell you what your family should look like. No. You study biology and you can explain to me how a cell works, how a plant grows, how an ecosystem in nature is formed. Yes, you can tell me that. You cannot tell me the why it is this way. It can never do that. The why can never be answered. And that's one. And two, the should. Should I and shouldn't I is not a natural science question. Should I? I don't know. Go check in your lab. Can your lab tell me if I should? It can only tell me what happens. If I do this, this happens. If I do that, that happens. It tells me the how. It doesn't tell me the why. And this is a huge topic. We have to talk a lot more about it. It's a good question.